Nyala had always enjoyed quiet places. Growing up in her small Apache community, she had learned to appreciate the soft sounds of nature, wind passing through the junipers, distant animal calls, and the steady rhythm of her own footsteps on dry paths. She liked spaces where she could think, breathe, and feel connected to the world around her. So when Tomas asked her to visit the old cabin near the edge of the ranch land, she imagined it would be exactly the kind of peaceful afternoon she usually enjoyed. Tomas was different from many of the ranch workers she occasionally saw in town. He was young, only a few years older than Nayla, and had an easygoing way of talking that made people comfortable. Unlike others who asked strange questions or made assumptions about her background, Tomas listened with real interest whenever she shared something about her traditions or her family. He loved sketching landscapes, animals, and people, and he often asked Nayela if he could draw the things she described from her home, like the patterns her grandmother painted on pottery or the colors of the sunset from her side of the valley. Because of that, she trusted him. She believed he understood that she preferred calm spaces and respectful company. So that morning, when she packed a small bag with some fruit and a notebook, she felt relaxed and even excited. She thought the visit would be simple. She would sit with Tomas while he sketched, maybe teach him a few Apache words he had asked about recently, and enjoy a peaceful break from her usual responsibilities. The walk to the cabin took nearly an hour. But the path was open and bright. Autumn sunlight warmed the ground, and the air carried a faint smell of hay from the ranch fields farther out. As she approached the cabin, she noticed it looked older than she remembered from passing by years ago. The wood had faded to a soft gray, and the porch creaked when she stepped on it. Still, the cabin had a charm, a quiet, forgotten charm that made it feel safe. Tomas opened the door the moment she reached it, smiling in his usual warm way. "I'm glad you came," he said, stepping aside so she could enter. The inside of the cabin was tidy, but filled with little signs of his hobbies. Sketches were pinned to the walls, drawings of cattle, horses, clouds, and even a few landscapes that looked like places near her home. On the table, pencils and charcoal sticks were scattered everywhere, along with an open book about plants in the Southwest. Nyla looked around the cabin, feeling pleased. It was exactly the peaceful place she had hoped for. She placed her bag on the table and sat on the small wooden chair by the window. Light streamed through it in a soft golden beam, landing across the sketchbook Tomas had left open. "This place is nice," she said softly. "It's quiet," Tomas agreed. "That's why I like it. No noise, no interruptions." His words made her smile, because they matched her own thoughts perfectly. She imagined they would spend the next few hours just talking and drawing, maybe sharing stories. She even thought she might show him a few songs her grandmother had taught her, the ones that didn't belong to ceremonies and could be shared freely. She loved singing quietly when she felt comfortable, and today felt like one of those rare days. Tomas sat across from her and started flipping through his sketches. He asked her which places from her reservation she wanted him to draw next, and she pointed to a few hills that looked beautiful during certain sunsets. He listened closely, nodding and brushing his pencil lightly over the paper as he formed the first outlines. Nyla watched his hand move with steady focus, admiring how he paid attention to every detail she mentioned. As he drew, they talked about simple things, how work at the ranch had been busy lately, how her younger cousins were learning traditional dances, and how the weather seemed to be cooling earlier this year. Everything about the moment felt peaceful and easy. She didn't feel rushed or out of place. She felt like she belonged right there, in that warm beam of sunlight, sharing stories with someone who respected her. Nayla leaned back a little, letting her eyes wander across the room. She wondered how long the cabin had stood here. The wooden floor felt worn but strong, and the walls held the smell of old pine. Dust floated in the air, glowing in the sunlight like tiny drifting stars. In that moment, the entire world felt still. Then Tomas mentioned something about a new sketch he wanted to try, drawing a portrait based on the description she once gave him of her great-grandmother. Naila hesitated, unsure if such a personal story should be reshaped into art, but Tomas assured her he only wanted to honor the memory she had shared. After a moment, she nodded. She trusted him enough to let him try. The mood remained gentle. Tomas prepared his charcoal, and Naila pulled out her notebook to write down a few things she wanted to remember later. The stillness of the cabin wrapped around them like a soft blanket. No loud voices, no unexpected interruptions, just quiet company. As she wrote, she thought about how rare moments like this were. Many people outside her community didn't understand the careful balance she lived with, moving between the world of her traditions and the world beyond it. With Tomas, she never felt judged or questioned in strange ways. He seemed genuinely curious, without trying to change her or compare her life to his. She appreciated that more than she could easily explain. A gentle breeze slipped through the window cracks, and she closed her eyes for a moment, enjoying the cool touch of the air. She heard the scratch of charcoal as Tomas continued working, stopping now and then to glance at her notebook as if gathering details from her posture. She didn't mind. It made her smile a little, knowing he found inspiration in everyday things. She imagined the afternoon continuing like this, slow, calm, and thoughtful. She thought they might eat the fruit she brought, maybe laugh about something silly the horses had done that week. She felt so relaxed that she even considered asking him to teach her how to sketch properly, since her own attempts always came out uneven. She liked the idea of learning something new from him, something patient and quiet. For a moment, she allowed herself to forget the outside world entirely. She forgot the expectations placed on her at home, the tasks waiting for her later, and the long list of responsibilities she would return to the next day. In the cabin, everything felt simple. She opened her eyes again and looked at Tomas. He had a small smile on his face, the kind he wore when he was completely focused but enjoying himself. She felt glad to be the person he wanted to share this peaceful space with. She felt understood. Naila placed her notebook down and rested her hands on the table, feeling grateful. She thought about saying something appreciative, maybe thanking him for inviting her, or telling him she liked the cabin. But before she could speak, she noticed him glance briefly toward the door, as though he heard something outside. She didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just the wind or a loose board shifting in the sun. She continued looking around the cabin, feeling comfortable, unaware that the quiet afternoon she expected might change. At that moment, nothing felt unusual or troubling. The world still held its peaceful glow. She assumed everything would stay exactly as it was, calm, private, and shared only between the two of them. She had no idea anyone else might appear. No hint of interruption crossed her mind. She thought the day belonged only to them, and she felt completely safe in that idea. She had no reason to expect otherwise. Naila was still seated by the window when she heard a soft sound outside, something like a footstep pressing gently against dry ground. She didn't think much of it at first. The ranch land was wide and open, and it was normal to hear animals wandering around, horses brushing against fences or cattle moving lazily through the grass. Sometimes even the wind created the illusion of someone walking past, especially near old wooden structures like the cabin. Tomas continued sketching with quiet concentration, but Naila noticed his hand pause for a moment. He lifted his head slightly, listening. She tilted hers, too, wondering if he heard the same sound. For a second, silence returned, warm and steady like before. Naila relaxed again, thinking it must have been nothing important. Then came another sound, a little clearer this time, a soft crunch of gravel right outside the porch. Naila looked at Tomas. waiting for him to say something, but he only gave a small shrug, as if he was not completely sure either. He looked towards the window and then back at his sketchbook, trying to act normal, though she could tell something had lightly caught his attention. Nayla tried to focus on her notebook again, but her thoughts drifted. Who would be out here? The cabin wasn't a popular place. Most of the ranch workers were busy with chores in other areas of the property. The cabin was old and not used for much except storage, and recently Tomas had been using it as a quiet spot for drawing. She wondered if maybe one of the ranch horses had wandered free again. A few weeks earlier, she remembered Tomas telling her a story about a friendly horse that liked to push open simple gates and explore wherever it could. That thought made her smile a little, imagining the horse bumping into the porch steps. But before she could ask about it, she heard the sound again, this time accompanied by what clearly seemed like low voices. They were muffled, but definitely human. Nayela's eyes widened slightly. Voices meant people, and people meant unexpected company, something she had not prepared herself for today. Her heart didn't race, and she didn't feel fear, just surprise. She and Tomas had been enjoying such a quiet moment that the idea of others arriving seemed almost out of place. She slowly turned her head to look at Tomas. His expression tightened for a brief second. Not worry, but something like discomfort. He put down his charcoal stick and stood up. "I'll check," he said softly, though his voice didn't sound completely relaxed. He walked to the window and peeked outside, his posture straight and alert. Nayela remained seated, unsure what to expect. She could still hear the voices clearer now, mixed with the sound of boots lightly tapping the wooden porch. Footsteps, steady and confident, moved closer to the door. She straightened her back, smoothing her skirt quietly, preparing herself to greet whoever might walk in. She believed in being polite, even when surprised. The door opened with a small squeak before Tomas could reach it. 3 ranchers entered without hesitation. They were older than Tomas, their faces sun-worn, their clothes dusty from long hours outdoors. They carried the casual confidence of people who felt comfortable walking into places on ranch land without knocking. Their voices, once muffled from outside, now filled the cabin with an energy very different from the peaceful stillness of a moment ago. One rancher stepped in first, smiling in a friendly but bold way, looking around the cabin as if checking to see what was happening inside. Another followed behind him, stretching his back from a long morning of work. The third one removed his hat politely, but still seemed unbothered by the fact that they had entered without an invitation. Nayela felt a wave of surprise wash through her. She had imagined the entire day would be quiet and private, just her and Tomas sharing stories and art. She did not mind meeting new people, but she had not expected company in this isolated cabin. She sat upright, trying to remain calm and respectful. Tomas positioned himself a little closer to her, though not in a protective way, simply in a way that showed he understood the sudden shift in atmosphere. "I didn't know they were coming," he murmured quietly to her, though the ranchers didn't seem to be listening closely. The first rancher noticed Nayela almost immediately, his eyebrows lifted with polite surprise. "Oh," he said, "didn't expect anybody else here." His tone wasn't rude or unkind, just curious, yet Nayela felt his eyes linger on her longer than necessary, as if trying to understand who she was and why she was there. The second rancher smiled at her. "Well, afternoon," he said in a friendly tone. "Didn't mean to interrupt anything." Nayela returned a small, polite smile. "Good afternoon," she said softly. She kept her voice steady and calm, though inside she felt slightly uncomfortable with the sudden attention. The third rancher gave a little nod in greeting, but seemed more interested in the sketches on the wall. He walked up to one and leaned in as if trying to understand what it depicted. "You've been busy with these, huh?" he said to Tomas. Tomas forced a small smile, rubbing the back of his neck. "Just practicing," he replied. Didn't think anyone would stop by today? Well, the first rancher said, stepping further inside. We were passing through and figured we'd check on the place. Didn't expect visitors. Nyla listened quietly, wondering how long they would stay. She didn't dislike their presence, but she felt the sudden shift from peaceful silence to busy conversation. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, not uncomfortable, but simply crowded for a moment that had originally been meant for two people. The second rancher approached the table with the sketches and gave a gentle whistle. You're getting good, boy, he said to Tomas. Better every time we see your work. Tomas gave a modest shrug. Trying my best, he said. The first rancher finally turned his attention back to Nyla. He still looked curious, not in a judgmental way, but in the way people sometimes look at someone they don't recognize in a familiar place. He asked, You here helping him with something? Nyla shook her head calmly. Just visiting, she said. We were spending some quiet time. Ah, the man replied, nodding. Quiet, huh? Sorry to break that. She smiled politely once more. It's all right. But inside, she felt something she could not fully describe. Not fear, not discomfort, just the sense that the afternoon she expected had changed shape, and now she needed to adjust to its new rhythm. The third rancher found a seat on a wooden stool in the corner, crossing his arms with an easy grin. Well, we don't mean to take over the place, he said lightly. Just checking in. The room became filled with small conversations, nothing harsh, nothing harmful, only unexpected. Nyla sat quietly, observing everyone, sensing the shift in the flow of the day. She wondered if Tomas had known they might appear but chose not to mention it, or if he was just as surprised as she was. She thought she had understood what this visit was going to be. She thought she and Tomas would be alone, sharing a peaceful afternoon. But now that these ranchers had walked in, the moment felt different. Not ruined, just altered. She wondered what the next minutes or hours would bring. She kept her posture calm and her expression gentle, choosing not to show her surprise too clearly. She wanted to stay polite, patient, and open-minded. After all, she told herself, unexpected company did not have to be unpleasant. It simply required understanding, adjustment, and steady breathing. But quietly, deep inside, she repeated one thought. This was not what she expected today. Nyla remained seated by the window, trying her best to keep her expression soft and calm, even though the cabin now felt very different from before. A few minutes ago, the quiet air had wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Now, with the ranchers inside, the mood had shifted. It wasn't uncomfortable in a dangerous way, but it was busy, louder, and filled with a kind of energy she wasn't prepared for. The ranchers talked easily among themselves, making light comments about the sketches and about the morning work they had completed. Every now and then, they glanced over at Nyla with curious eyes. Their curiosity wasn't unfriendly, but it still made her feel a little like she was being examined. She wasn't used to that feeling, especially not in a small room where every glance felt stronger. Tomas stayed close, hovering near her chair as if he wanted to keep her from feeling too out of place. He was polite to the ranchers, answering their questions and smiling when they complimented his artwork, but Nyla could tell he wasn't completely relaxed either. His shoulders looked a bit tense, and he kept tapping his thumb against his palm the way he sometimes did when he felt unsure. One rancher, the one who had walked in first, stepped closer to Nyla, still carrying that friendly but curious expression. He leaned slightly to look at the notebook she had placed on the table. "You writing stories in there?" he asked casually. Nyla shook her head gently. "Just notes," she said. "Things I want to remember later." "Ah," he replied with a nod, though she could tell he wanted to know more. People often wanted to know more than she felt ready to share. especially when they met her for the first time. The second rancher stretched and glanced at her with a thoughtful smile. "You live over by the reservation, don't you?" he asked kindly. "Long walk to come out here." "Yes," Nayla replied softly, "but the walk was nice today." "That's good," he said warmly. "Nice morning for a visit, I guess." His tone was polite enough, but something about the question made Nayla feel small, as if she needed to explain why she was there. She knew he didn't mean anything wrong, but she felt a small shift inside her, something like a reminder that this wasn't her space, even if Tomas had invited her here. The third rancher, still seated on the stool, smiled in her direction. "You two working on something together?" he asked. "No," Nayla replied. "Just spending time." The rancher chuckled gently, not mocking, just amused. "Well, this old cabin doesn't get many visitors other than us and the cows," he said. "Nice to see something different for a change." Nayla returned a small smile, though inside she felt a bit unsure. She tried to keep her thoughts steady. She didn't want to seem unfriendly or closed off. She just wished she had been prepared for this moment. Tomas finally stepped forward a little, clearing his throat. "We were having a quiet afternoon," he said, trying to sound casual but hinting that the sudden crowd wasn't expected. "Didn't think anyone was coming around today." The first rancher shrugged pleasantly. "We were just out checking the fences," he explained. "Thought we'd stop in before heading back." Then he added with a light grin, "Didn't mean to surprise anyone." Nayla felt Tomas glance at her, perhaps checking to see if she was all right. She gave him a small, reassuring smile, but she knew he could see through it just a little. He was used to reading small signs from people, tiny movements, slight changes in posture. He could tell she was not as relaxed as before. The ranchers continued chatting, asking Tomas questions about his work and joking among themselves. None of their words were harsh or unkind, but the tone felt different from the peaceful quiet Nayla had been enjoying. It felt like she had stepped into a situation she wasn't prepared for, like she was suddenly sitting on the edge of someone else's world, rather than simply visiting a friend. She listened politely as they talked, answering when spoken to, but mostly keeping her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't want to seem nervous, yet she felt a gentle pressure inside her chest, a quiet discomfort she didn't quite know how to describe. The first rancher eventually turned back toward her, curiosity still clear in his eyes. "So, what brings you out here today?" he asked, not accusing or rude, just genuinely wondering. Nayla chose her words carefully. "I came to spend some quiet time with my friend," she said, glancing at Tomas with a kind expression. "Oh," the rancher replied, understanding flashing across his face. Then he laughed softly. "Well, I guess we didn't help with the quiet part." His laughter was not mean, but Nayla felt her cheeks warm a little. She had imagined a peaceful afternoon, just her and Tomas sharing stories and drawings. She had imagined sunlight, calm conversation, and maybe learning something new. She had not imagined sitting across from three strangers who filled the room with noise and questions. The second rancher gave a sympathetic smile. "We didn't mean to interrupt," he said kindly. "Really, we just thought the cabin was empty." "It's all right," Nayla said again, trying to keep her voice steady. Inside, though, she was beginning to understand something she had not realized before. The world Tomas lived in was not always the quiet world she expected. On ranch land, people moved freely, checking places, stopping by cabins, walking in and out as needed. To them, this cabin wasn't a private space. It was part of their daily routine. Tomas, noticing her quietness, finally sat down next to her. "We were just talking about some drawings," he told the ranchers, giving Nayla a soft look that expressed support. "And about places she wanted me to sketch." "That's so?" the third rancher said with interest. Your home must be real pretty. Nyela nodded gently. It is, she said softly. There are many colors at sunset, and the hills look different every season. The rancher's eyes brightened. Sounds beautiful, he said sincerely. She appreciated his kindness, but she still felt the weight of their sudden presence. Their interest was not unkind, but it was strong enough to make her aware of every tiny movement she made. She was careful with her words, careful with her smile, careful with her posture. She didn't want to seem rude, but she also didn't want to appear overly open or exposed. Tomas placed his sketchbook on the table, pushing aside the pencils and clearing a little space. Nyela was telling me about the colors her grandmother used in her pottery, he said, trying to shift the attention away from her personally and toward something she could speak about comfortably. Oh? The first rancher asked with interest. Pottery, huh? Nyela nodded. My grandmother teaches the younger ones, she said. She paints with natural colors we make from plants and stones. That's real nice, the rancher said. Must take a lot of patience. It does, she answered, smiling faintly. But it's beautiful work. The ranchers listened with interest, and although their attention was still strong, it felt a little gentler now. Talking about her grandmother made her feel more grounded. It reminded her of home, of her culture, of the things that made her feel steady and proud. Bit by bit, she began to feel her shoulders relax. But the quiet part of her afternoon was gone. She knew that. She felt it in the air, in the room, and in the way the conversation kept shifting. She could sense the balance of the space had changed, and now she was trying to find her place in this new, unexpected mixture of voices. Tomas lowered his voice a little and whispered, I'm sorry. I really didn't know they'd come. She gave him a soft look of understanding. It's all right, she whispered back. I just didn't expect it. Then she turned her attention back to the others, doing her best to remain composed and warm. She didn't want anyone to feel unwelcome. She simply needed a little time to adjust. The ranchers kept speaking kindly, unaware of how their sudden appearance had changed the energy of the afternoon for her. They meant no harm. They were just being themselves, loud, friendly, curious, and comfortable. Nyela breathed gently, calming herself. She reminded herself that she was still in control of her own calmness, her own space within her mind. She reminded herself that she could handle this moment with grace. But a quiet truth echoed inside her, soft but clear. This was not the peaceful silence she had imagined. This was something else, something louder, more complicated, and unexpectedly revealing. Nyela sat quietly while the ranchers continued their light conversations, but inside her heart, something was beginning to shift. She had been patient since the moment they entered, and she had answered each of their questions politely. Still, she could feel a small heaviness growing in her chest, a warm but uncomfortable pressure, as if her thoughts were asking her to speak, even though her voice preferred quiet spaces. Tomas noticed it first. He had been glancing at her every few minutes, checking her expression without making it obvious. He knew her well enough to see the small hints, the way her fingers curled slightly into her palm, the way her shoulders held a bit more stiffness than usual, and the way her eyes drifted away whenever someone asked her a personal question she did not volunteer. One of the ranchers made another comment about how busy the reservation must be, and although he spoke kindly, Nyela felt the same quiet discomfort rise again. She didn't want to seem annoyed or distant. She respected people, even when their curiosity felt like too much. But she also knew that silence sometimes caused misunderstandings. If she didn't gently express her feelings, the tension inside her would only grow stronger. The cabin felt warm with sunlight still filtering through the window, yet the air now carried a slight weight. It wasn't unpleasant, just complicated. Nyela took a slow breath, remembering the calm voice of her grandmother who always said, "Speak when your heart needs space." Silence is good, but truth is important too. With that thought, Nayla slowly lifted her head and looked at the ranchers with a soft but steady gaze. "I thought it would be just us today," she said quietly, but clearly enough for the room to hear. Her words were not sharp. They carried no frustration. Instead, they sounded honest, gentle, and sincere, like a leaf falling softly onto the surface of a quiet pond. "I came here expecting a quiet visit. I did not know others might come." The room paused, not in shock, not in discomfort, just in mild surprise. The ranchers seemed taken aback, not because she had spoken, but because her voice held a surprising strength wrapped in kindness. They had likely never heard her speak so directly before, and they respected her honesty. The first rancher blinked and straightened slightly. "Oh," he said, his tone warm and understanding. "Didn't mean to crowd you, miss. Truly didn't." Nayla nodded gently. "I know," she replied. "I don't blame anyone, but I felt surprised, that's all." The second rancher gave a small smile, sympathetic and humble. "We didn't realize you were looking for some peace. We can be pretty loud at times." He chuckled softly, then added, "Didn't mean to disturb your afternoon." The third rancher, still sitting on the stool, leaned forward with a thoughtful expression. "I'm glad you said something," he said kindly. "Sometimes we walk in thinking we're helping or checking on things, but we forget others might have different plans." Tomas looked relieved, though he was still slightly embarrassed. He rubbed the back of his neck and whispered, "I really should have told you people sometimes come by. I didn't think about it. I'm sorry." Nayla gave him a soft smile, forgiving and calm. "I understand. You didn't expect them either." Her voice stayed pure and gentle the entire time, like someone choosing peace even while speaking truth. The ranchers exchanged looks, friendly, respectful looks, as if they were seeing Nayla in a new light, not as someone shy or quiet, but as someone graceful and able to express herself with kindness. They seemed to appreciate that she wasn't upset or blaming them. She was simply being honest about her feelings. The first rancher nodded slowly. "You deserve your quiet time," he said. "We don't want to take that away from you." "We'll make this visit short," the second rancher added politely. "We just came to check the place and say hello." "That's all," said the third rancher. Nayla felt the room shift again. This time the air grew lighter, softer, and friendlier. Her small moment of honesty had cleared the tension she'd been carrying silently. She didn't feel she had pushed anyone away. She simply felt more comfortable in her own space now. Tomas sat beside her, now looking visibly relaxed. "Thank you for saying that," he told her softly. "I didn't know how to express it without sounding rude." "But you did it in such a good way." She smiled shyly. "I just wanted to be honest." The ranchers were quieter now, not silent, but softer in their voices. Their curiosity became gentler, too. They didn't ask her as many personal questions. Instead, they focused more on Tomas's drawings, making light comments and admiring the work without filling the cabin with as much noise. Nayla felt herself slowly relax. Her breathing became smoother. The quiet space inside her mind began to open again, even with others still present in the room. She realized something important. Speaking up didn't disturb the peace. Sometimes it protected it. One of the ranchers noticed she had fruit in her bag and politely asked, "Did you bring that for the two of you?" Nayla nodded. "Yes, I brought it for a calm afternoon." "That's real nice," he replied warmly. "Hope you still get that calm." His words were sincere, and Nayla appreciated it more than she expected. A short while later, the ranchers stood up, stretching their backs and dusting off their clothes, as ranch workers often did before heading out again. They smiled kindly at Nayla, giving her respectful nods. They seemed to carry a new understanding with them, a silent recognition of her gentle boundary. Well, the first rancher said, we won't take any more of your time. We'll let you two get back to your quiet afternoon. Sorry again for surprising you, the second rancher added. Next time we'll knock, said the third rancher with a light-hearted grin. Nayla's soft smile returned. Thank you, she said warmly. Have a good day. The ranchers stepped out of the cabin one by one. As they left, their footsteps became softer and softer until the sounds disappeared into the bright, open land outside. The door closed gently, and silence settled around the room once again. Not the same silence as before. This one was deeper, more meaningful. It was a silence shaped by understanding, by honesty shared, and by the feeling of space being restored. Tomas let out a slow breath that sounded like relief. I didn't realize how crowded it felt until they left, he said with a small laugh. Nayla smiled. It wasn't bad, she said, just unexpected. Still, Tomas replied, I should have prepared you. I should have told you that sometimes people stop by without warning. It's all right, she reassured him again. We handled it. He looked at her with admiration, a gentle pride in his eyes. You handled it better than I did, he said. You spoke in such a peaceful way. You didn't sound upset. You just sounded honest. Nayla looked down at her hands for a moment, then back out the window where sunlight still glowed across the dusty ground. My grandmother always says truth is softer when spoken with kindness, she said. Tomas nodded slowly. Your grandmother is a wise person. They both sat quietly for a moment, letting the cabin breathe again. The peaceful feeling slowly returned, familiar and soothing. Nayla felt more comfortable now, more grounded. She appreciated that she had found her voice without hurting anyone's feelings. She looked around the room, her mind settling once more. The sketches, the sunlight, the wooden floor, everything felt calm again. This time, the calmness felt earned, stronger than before, because she had helped restore it. She gently picked up her notebook, ready to continue writing. Tomas lifted his pencil again, returning to his sketch with a quiet smile. The afternoon began to feel like hers again. When the door closed behind the ranchers and their footsteps drifted away into the quiet distance, Nayla finally felt the room settle back into the calm she had been hoping for. The sunlight still streamed through the window, painting soft golden shapes on the floor, and the warm air returned to its peaceful stillness. It was almost surprising how quickly the cabin regained its quiet atmosphere, as if it had been waiting patiently for the noise to pass. Nayla let out a slow breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her shoulders relaxed, sinking gently back into their natural comfort. She looked at Tomas, who was now standing near the table, rolling his pencil between his fingers with a thoughtful expression. He seemed relieved, too, though he looked more embarrassed than anything else. I really am sorry, he said, breaking the silence in a soft voice. I didn't think anyone would come by today. If I had known, I would have told you. Nayla smiled gently. It's all right, she said. You didn't do anything wrong. But still, he insisted quietly, I should have warned you that the ranch isn't always a quiet place. I didn't want today to feel different from what you expected. She looked at him with warm eyes. You invited me for a calm visit, and we still have it now, she said softly. And the rest? It's just life. Sometimes things happen that we don't expect. Her voice held a peaceful steadiness. She meant every word. Tomas nodded, though he still seemed thoughtful. He picked up his sketchbook again and placed it back on the table, smoothing the pages with care. Do you want to stay a bit longer? He asked gently. We can still draw, or talk, or whatever you'd like. Nayla looked out the window for a moment, admiring the open land stretching far into the distance. She could see the tops of trees near the reservation, glowing softly under the afternoon sun. Part of her wanted to stay longer, enjoying the quiet moment that had returned. But another part of her felt the pull of home, the comfort of familiar voices, the warmth of her grandmother's stories, and the steady rhythm of her community. "I think I should head back soon," she said finally, but with no disappointment in her voice. "Not because I want to leave, just because it feels like the right time." Tomas accepted her answer with a gentle nod. "I'll walk you part of the way," he said. Naela picked up her small bag and placed her notebook inside. She double-checked that she hadn't left anything behind. As she stood and smoothed her skirt, she took one last look around the cabin. It felt different now, not in a negative way, but in a more meaningful way. It wasn't just a quiet place anymore. It had become a place where she had found her voice, where she learned something about herself. The two of them stepped outside onto the porch. The air felt cooler now, carrying the scent of warm earth and faint traces of hay. The sky wore shades of pale blue mixed with the first hints of evening gold. A soft breeze brushed past them, lifting a strand of Naila's hair. They began walking along the narrow dirt path. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt natural, like the quiet after a gentle rain. Both were lost in their own thoughts, yet aware of each other's presence in a peaceful way. After a few minutes, Tomas finally spoke. "You know," he said slowly, "the way you spoke earlier, it was really strong." Naila tilted her head. "Strong?" "Yeah," he replied with a soft smile. "Not loud, not harsh, just honest. You sounded like someone who knew exactly what she felt and wasn't afraid to say it kindly. I've never seen anyone speak that way before." Naila felt warmth rise in her chest, not from embarrassment, but from a quiet sense of pride. "I wasn't trying to be strong," she said. "I was just saying what my heart felt. I wanted to make space for myself without hurting anyone." "And you did," he said. "You handled everything better than I could have." Naila smiled at the compliment, though she didn't let it settle too deeply. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply learning, growing, figuring out how to carry her truth gracefully. They walked a bit farther until they reached a fork in the path, the point where ranch land slowly blended into the grounds that led toward her home. Tomas stopped there, as he always did, knowing she preferred to walk the rest of the way alone. It was her quiet time to think, to reflect, and to connect with herself before reaching home. He looked at her with a soft expression. "Thank you for spending the afternoon with me," he said. Naila nodded. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied. Then she added gently, "Next time, maybe we pick a place where people don't walk in so easily." Tomas laughed lightly, not in a teasing way, but in agreement. "Good idea," he said. "I'll make sure of that." For a moment, they simply stood there, sharing a peaceful silence that felt warmer than before. The earlier interruptions no longer weighed on the moment. In fact, they had shaped it into something more meaningful. Finally, Naila stepped forward, taking the path toward home. "See you soon, Tomas," she said. "See you soon," he echoed, watching her take her first few steps before he turned back toward the cabin. As Naila walked, the land around her began to shift into softer colors, the sky deepening with gentle orange hues. Each footstep felt steady and confident. The sunlight touched the ground with golden warmth, guiding her way across the familiar desert path. With every step, she felt a mix of emotions. She felt a little sadness that her quiet visit had been interrupted, but she also felt proud. She had spoken up with kindness. She had protected her space in a way that didn't hurt anyone, and she had learned that her voice could be gentle and strong at the same time. The breeze brushed against her as she walked, carrying the faint sounds of distant birds. She passed a few wildflowers growing near the path, small, bright spots of color standing tall in the dry ground. She paused for a moment to appreciate them, letting the calmness settle deeper into her chest. The closer she came to her home, the more she felt wrapped in the familiar comfort of her community. She could hear faint laughter from children playing somewhere in the distance, and the smell of food cooking drifted softly in the air. These simple, warm details brought a smile to her face. She knew her grandmother might ask how her day was, and she already knew how she would describe it. Peaceful, then surprising, then peaceful again. She would tell her grandmother that she had spoken honestly and kindly, just like she had been taught, and she knew her grandmother would smile proudly at that. As she reached the edge of her community, Nayla looked back once, just for a moment. She could still see the outline of the ranch land far behind her. She felt no frustration, no disappointment, just a calm understanding that life sometimes brings surprises, and those surprises can teach us things we never expected to learn. Then she turned back toward home, walking with steady steps, her heart light and her spirit quietly strong. And in the soft evening breeze, she carried with her the quiet truth she had spoken earlier, proof that she could protect her space with kindness and still walk forward with grace.